Walk us through the reaction to this stunning post from Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, some critics are calling it a victory after all of this criticism that Zuckerberg has faced over privacy. Now that he says it's really important. But I think the difference is really going to be in what we see Facebook do with this. It doesn't change the fact that they have their newsfeed. It doesn't change that their advertising business is built on personal user data. Not a lot changes about how Facebook's business works, and he didn't really talk about the advertising implications in his post the other day.
Now, Rich, you've been very bullish on Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg says that the news feed will remain, but that this will make ad targeting more harder. There will be less information to target ads to. Does that concern you?
I think it's honestly absurd, really, when you think about the fact of what is Facebook right now. It's something where you spend a lot of time browsing through news feeds in groups. The one thing you don't do a lot of, especially in this country, is you don't spend a lot of time messaging. When you go to message, I'm sure Sarah or Emily, if you go to message someone, you're generally using iMessage. Maybe you're using Snapchat if you're trying to reach someone younger, but you're not really using Facebook Messenger. Someone overseas is probably using WhatsApp for sure, but Facebook Messenger has not really caught on as the principal form in which you communicate, nor has direct messaging within Instagram. People are using it more, and I think it's a rapidly growing part of Facebook. But I think this, for Mark Zuckerberg and for Facebook, this is really trying to reclaim messaging. They want to dominate messaging and combine it with what they already do with Instagram stories, with Facebook stories, with WhatsApp stories. They want to have more time. They want to capture more of your daily time spent. And the one big place they're missing is messaging. And I think that's a big opportunity, not just to drive their content business over time, which has advertising, but really to drive the commerce business, which is in the very early stages. But I think they're taking very seriously is how to close that loop between content and marketing and commerce. And that's really the holy grail, is moving cars off lots and products off shelves. That's what this is all about, ultimately.
Now, Nick, Mark Zuckerberg told you that he sees private messaging growing the fastest. It's unclear if he meant on Facebook platform or other platforms. However, you astutely pointed out this raises a lot of questions. Did he really answer those questions when you spoke with him?
He answered some of the questions. He answered the question, maybe my central question was, the post was a little unclear about whether he's building a new network or whether he's going to just evolve the tools that Facebook has. And he was much clearer about that, which is that Facebook's current tools will continue to exist. They will evolve in this direction, and they will also be building something else. The biggest question is, if people do move more towards messaging, and if they do move off newsfeed, and particularly if they move to encrypted messaging, how do you monetize that? So yes, it will probably be some kind of payments processing. There will probably be some kind of Facebook coin that they will try to monetize. But the most interesting question is, how does a company that has turned into a $500 billion valuation based on big data collection and targeting off that data, how do they make money as they move into this new era?
Now, he told you the thinking is that there needs to be two types of platforms in the world. One is a more public platform, the digital equivalent of a town square, where you interact with lots of people at once. The other platform is the private space, the digital equivalent to the living room. But, and you tried to press him on this. The question is, how do these two work together, Sarah?
Yeah.
What are the questions that you have, Sarah, about the actual execution here?
Well, I think the biggest question we have if we're going into this living room type space, especially in the encrypted type of messaging, is whether Facebook will still be able to police that content. And the answer is really they won't. I mean, we've seen what's happened with WhatsApp, which is an encrypted messaging platform and has contributed greatly to the spread of misinformation and illegal kind of content in countries where it's popular. And Facebook hasn't been able to do anything about it because they literally can't see it, and they can't share information with governments. And so in some ways, in this new market that Facebook is trying to go into, they're washing their hands of that debate over what kind of content they should have oversight over.
Now, Rich, given that you said this sounds a lot like Snap, are you as bullish as you have been on Facebook when it comes to revenue and also engagement?
Look, I think the reality is if you think about the original, concept behind Snapchat. I remember going for a walk on the Venice boardwalk with Evan Spiegel, and he said, think about Snapchat this way. You can communicate all the time, just the way your sister or you know, when you were younger, you would talk on the phone endlessly, an actual phone, you know, to your friends endlessly, not texting them, but you would talk endlessly on the phone, and then in between you would watch television, you know, linear television. And that was kind of the goal of the left and right side of Snapchat going back to the very early days. So messaging and content can certainly live together. I think when you look at Facebook and Instagram, they've principally been content consumption platforms for news and information. You know, videos obviously growing very quickly. But look at Instagram. I mean, it's going to be a bigger business than Facebook ultimately. People are spending more and more time on Instagram. Yes, that's coming through stories, which isn't yet as monetizable as the core news feed. But I think the reality is this is all about capturing more of your time. There's going to be lots of ad dollars to grow on Instagram over the years to come. And so I think we're even more bullish than we have been. I think a lot of the fear that's been stoked by the media, broadly by the media and by regulators, that Facebook's dying or this is the end of Facebook. You know, look around you. People are using Facebook and Instagram more than ever before in aggregate. My 15-year-old daughter is using Facebook groups. I mean, I never would have assumed that, you got teenagers using Facebook groups because they're really interesting. You've got tons of people at all ages using Instagram stories. This is just the beginning for Facebook and Instagram. I think there's a lot of great growth ahead. And while there's lots of things to tackle in terms of privacy and the issues that Sarah just raised, which I think are not easy challenges to deal with, I think the reality is Facebook has more resources than anyone else, other than probably Google, to deal with those challenges.
Nick, as a fellow proverbial member of the media, why do you think Mark Zuckerberg is doing this? You know, interestingly, he told you that he's not so worried about the business. What he is more worried about is safety and security, because there will be less, it'll be less easy for them to track whether bad behavior is happening. That said, and not to be cliche, but is Facebook doing this for the right reasons? Is this just to avoid government scrutiny, to appease the FTC? Is it because of the media?
I mean, it's an incredibly interesting question and a hard one to answer. I would say that there are a couple of reasons why Facebook is doing this. Number one, as he said in the note, he does see that this is what people are doing. He's got dashboards of how people are using their phones, dashboards of how people are using Facebook. He sees this as the trend that people are going. Number two, he's older now, right? When he started Facebook, he was very young. He didn't care about privacy. He's now mid-30s, 2 children. I can imagine caring more about privacy. Number three, I do think there is a real benefit with regulators. If you look at the fundamental threat to Facebook right now, it's antitrust regulation. And many of the people pushing it the hardest have proposed a solution where Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp are split apart. If you imagine them being much more integrated, suddenly the argument from the antitrust side becomes much harder. And then fourth, I do think it does involve public perception and also employee perception. There is a sense that Facebook has been on the wrong side of history for the last year. Facebook cares about it because they like to be liked, but also because they don't want their engineers to leave. And so pivoting to privacy encryption that most people, particularly in the engineering community, think are the right way to go is a good way with employee retention and morale, which has huge benefits for them. So I think it's a combination of personal motives, maybe cynical government regulation motives, management motives, and financial motives.